It's really actually exciting to introduce this session. In recent time I've done quite a bit of work with Graham Anderson as part of the More Lambs More Often package that we built that I referred to earlier in the day about helping farmers to manage climatic variability. And I spoke to a couple of farmers. I said, you're hanging around, and of course, you know, I got the old, well, you can't forecast next week, so why do you want to talk about in 3 or 4 months' time? And it's another classic, you know, attitude, behaviour thing, and I'm thinking, well, you know, if that's how you feel about it, fair enough. But what I would say is that even Graham himself, and this is why I'm great that he's the person talking about it, is he kind of sees the information he's going to share with you as the icing on the cake. You know, there's a lot of concern about the spring and the signals for the spring this year. And what you've got to get much better at, and I shouldn't say you, I'm saying we, because I'm including myself in this, at measuring our actuals. So as we roll into August, you know, where are we at as far as the moisture in our soil bank? Where are we at as far as our feed on offer bank? Where are we at as far as money in the bank? So what's our flexibility there? Where are we at as far as supplementary feed reserves if you're relying on them? What's the body condition score of the animals? So that's just 5 banks that we can measure the level, you know, and then you can use this information to complement that. So in introducing Graham, he's part of the Climate Extension Program at the Department of Economic Development, based down at Geelong, yeah? And he's been behind things like the break and the fast break that you'll see for those that follow it on YouTube, and also the Climate Dogs initiative. And he has over 25 years experience in extension and communication and adoption. So we're in good hands.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. Good on you. Cheers. Thank you. I'm pretty amazed at how many of you have stuck through for this session. I was expecting about 30 or 40, so full credit to you, and thanks to whoever locked the doors. Yeah. I guess one of the things I remember about 10 years ago, you know, Queensland always had a great seasonal forecasting and a lot going on, and at Victoria at the time saying, well, you know, we don't know what's really driving our forecasting. And I remember that was largely the accepted wisdom even within our department, and it's amazing how that has changed within 10 years. So that's the journey I'm going to share with you. We know this stuff better than ever. One of the things that's interesting about trying to make sense of any information or commentary you get, and look at this fella here, everyone knows Glenn Stevens, the Reserve Bank, and you know, he whispers quietly away there, and when he says something, markets and dollars and everything moves. Now it's interesting, do we have an equivalent for the Reserve Bank of rainfall? And what's really interesting, with the science around this is probably better than ever, but the big challenge is, well, is that communication of that science being well done for the places where farmers live and farm? Because a lot of the stuff is done nationally, but you're needing to know, well, what's that mean for my district? And where do we get that? And I think one of the key things for this seasonal forecasting is that it's you can overuse it too. So first of all, you need a trusted source, but you also need to know that it's really telling you the preconditions for the season ahead. So just like when Glenn Stevens is saying, well, you know, there's a few things going on because of this, this and this, our next move in rates was likely to be down. That's the signal, and everyone starts to respond on that. And for seasonal forecasting, that's probably as simple as it is. Is there anything we need to know, Glenn? Is there some movement likely this spring actually might be above the line, or is this spring looking like it might be one of those below the lines? And it might be only every 3rd or 4th spring there's a clear signal. So part of it is about how we get to use and understand this. I was thinking too the other day that when we have an issue with one of the animals, you know, we rely on veterinary science to, and we've all got in our phones, you know, who you call to come and diagnose that issue. And the question when I ask for farmers, given how important understanding seasons and weather is, where do you get your information about the forecasts and climate? And I'm amazed at the range of places where farmers get information. And some of it's really good, and some of it is probably pretty scary. So for part of that reason, I'm not surprised that there's a lot of scepticism about these forecasts and whether they're any good or not. So I guess part of our sort of job has been saying, you know, there's some good stuff here, let's make sure people understand it, know how to use it. One of the key things, if you're about to make a key decision, a key thing you're needing with the information that you're basing it on is you're needing some trust in either the messenger or the commentary. You're wanting it to know that it's based on some good science. You're also wanting to know that it's contexted for your either industry or your region. And you just don't want a forecast. You actually want the commentary behind it, saying, well, if it's going to be, a bit wetter, why are they saying that? Oh, okay, because of those things. Well, actually, it gives you a little bit more confidence than to say, well, okay, well, I'll go and make a decision based on some of that. You also want to know it's actually worked previously. So, and I guess that's part of what we're sharing the journey today. Whenever we talk to farmers too, I always say this is what we need. We need better forecasts. The Bureau's got to get better. And surprisingly, they actually have got a lot better. And as much as, it is a sport to poke fun at the Bureau, the 3-day forecast from the 80s is as accurate as what we have today for the 7-day forecast. And it's not foolproof, but there is, with all of the aircraft, the satellites, everything whizzing around, there's great data, great modelling, the ability to see a bit into the future. And we're certainly in a lot better place than we were. But that's not the only thing. One of the key things the Bureau often complain to me is saying, no, we didn't say that. There's a lot of misinterpretation about when the Bureau, and they have, careful language how they express things, and sometimes half of the farmers are misreading what they're actually saying and saying, well, that's an issue. We need to improve how we communicate that. This is too important to be getting this wrong. The next bit, and I guess what I've been really pleased with is just with this literacy. Farmers, it's been amazing, and even with the Break newsletter, there's almost 3,000 subscribers to that. But the biggest increase has been in the last few years of livestock producers. There's actually as many livestock producers now get that as grains farmers. So that's great that everyone's tuning in. The good news is that actually the forecasting is, it's got some value, but there's a whole lot of things about what you do which is completely under your control. So whatever the season brings, we've got no control of, but how you respond. And some of the tools and the apps and the products that are all part of this conference, it's amazing what you guys do to manage variable seasons. It's just fantastic. And as we increase our production systems and the treadmill of production gets wound up a bit quicker, we've actually got to improve our skill at how we deal with boom or bust springs. Make the most of the good ones and work out when actually when we've got to change some dials because the spring's looking a bit iffy. So we need all of these happening at the same time, and I guess that's what's going on. Now we're just going to do a quick 101 climate. This is where it rained last year, and you can see here. This sort of colour is over 900 mil, 1200 mil. And what do you notice about that? Rain's around the edges. And the key ingredients for making rainfall, you need two things. First of all, you've got to have a supply of moisture, of good, moist, tropical air. And most of the moisture comes from the tropics. But we need a good flow of moist air. But what else do you need for that moisture to fall out as rain? Because the meteorologists tell us that if all we have is moist air, it's just humid. Something's got to make it actually fall out. And what it is that makes it fall out is actually warm, moist air meeting cold air, and then out it drops as rain. So you can see right along the range here, moist air comes in, gets lifted up on the range. As you go up, it gets colder. That moisture drops out as rain. When you come the other side of the range, air's sinking, comes down, it can hold more moisture because it's getting warmer, and it's the rain shadow effect. And we just happen to be living down here where, we've got ranges and all of that, but we've got all of this regular flow of cold fronts coming through, which is a fantastic trigger. And it's really the combination of these triggers down here and then where's moisture blowing in for making good rainfall. This is a decile map of that same last year, but basically decile maps, for those that haven't seen them, is where for any particular place, if you get their 100-year rainfall record and you compare it against what they had last year, it just says that, well, decile 1 was where the rain they got last year was in the equivalent of the driest 10% of years. Or a decile 10 is where the rain they got last year was in the wettest 10% of years of records. And you can see that dry finish, and there's a legacy of that here where really, rain after July last year fell off a cliff in Western Victoria. So, decile 1 spring. So that's a decile map. We look back, the Millennium Drought broke, 2010-11 was Australia's wettest 2-year period on record, just pipped 1974 and 75. interesting links there because it was the same things were happening there that caused both of those, which we'll talk about. But I meet one of the famous myths I get is about Lake Eyre, that Lake Eyre, when it's full, the moisture comes out of Lake Eyre and makes it rain, and saying, well, do you think Lake Eyre's got enough moisture to rain from all the way from there to Broome? It's not, you know. Lake Eyre actually fills when something bigger than it has filled its catchment and there's water coming through. So where did all this moisture come from? And that's what I'll point to. Since 97 though, and a lot of farmers comment to me, but what's been interesting, we've probably only had about three years above average rainfall since 97. So the odds have changed a bit for us. What's going on with that? And I guess the whole discussion is you've got large parts of Australia since 97 is, you know, wettest on record. But these southern tips, what's the story going on? Most farmers say, you know, there's good old-fashioned variability, but what's going on there? And yeah, that's that broader story for Victoria's rainfall. And we can see how variable it is. What makes the difference? We remember these years, they're scarred in our memory, 2006 and 82, 83 drought and 68. And then these years. What makes the difference when a year like that and a year like this? What is the difference? If only there was something that could give us some idea. Oh, hang on, we might have something. Well, here they are. This is what... we live at the crossroads here of four amazing climate drivers. And I love this image because it's a better reflection of where we sit in the planet. That's Antarctica. You can see Australia here and Southeast Australia with its own little system. We just live at the crossroads of four really important climate drivers. This one here, I guess for making rainfall down here, you've got to have a good supply of moisture. So these warm oceans around the equator where the oceans are the warmest and they're freezing down here, got a good supply of moisture coming in. The Pacific Ocean, out here we've got the El Nino Southern Oscillation, really important. Basically the trade winds blow moisture towards Australia, so it's a regular feed for moisture. Now that ocean has, and we sort of came up with an analogy of sheepdogs, that each of these basically have got their own character, and some years they're more helpful than others. Sometimes they're in good form, sometimes they should be just left on the chain. And the Pacific Ocean, El Nino is the drier years. What's happening then in El Nino years is that all the warmest waters over off South America, they're getting floods, heaps of cloud and all of that. The trade winds even go backwards, and it just means that, well, for any rain events we're getting down here, they're trying to tap into a moisture source, but it's not likely coming from that direction. The new kid on the block's the Indian Ocean Dipole, similar thing over here, but this area and how that ocean's set up can be a really useful moisture feed for those northwest cloud bands, which feed in, and actually the strongest correlation for anywhere in Australia for rainfall for the Indian Ocean Dipole is in southwest Victoria. Its fingerprints are all over our wetter and drier springs. And of course, one of the key things is the triggers, and you can see these in the Southern Ocean, these amazing winds which whirl around, and they're really the conveyor belt for all these cold fronts that flick their tail across southern Australia. And they're the triggers for us that trigger comes through cold air, it's needing a feed, each system just needing a feed of good moisture coming in. So seasonal forecasting is all about, well, what's the preconditions for this season? How are these oceans? Are they just normal and chaotic, or actually no, they're both dogs have gone through into the dry paddock. And when we look at years like 2006, we had an El Nino in the Pacific, so this one wasn't, misbehaving, and the IOD was in its dry phase at the same time. And so when both the dogs have shot through the fence at the wrong time, that's not helpful. So if you're sort of knowing that's going to happen, that'd be worth hearing about that in June, July, August. Also in 2010, spring 2010, we had a La Nina here. So trade winds, stronger, blowing extra moisture in the Pacific, and Indian Ocean was also in its wet phase. So both of them turned the taps on, and the last time they both turned on was back to 74, 75. So, so there's history there. They don't often all line up at the same time, but when they do, it's a fairly good signal. So that's when Glenn Stevens would even be starting to get excited about seeing those sort of things lining up. So they're climate dogs. We basically turned each of these, the science of each of them, into a 90-second story, and it always made sense with farmers because you just know that there's if each of these dogs does the right thing, farming can be a great experience. Moving a mob of sheep, it's just one of the most pleasant things you can do. But if 2 or 3 of the dogs start playing up, it's just buggers up a good afternoon. So it's just the same with these sheep dogs. What I've got here is a sea surface temperature map. And this is basically, these oceans along the equator are a lot warmer than down here, but this is an anomaly map. So it's showing the change in temperature. These colours represent an area of ocean that's 2 degrees warmer than its long-term average. And these blue colours is where an area of ocean is cooler than its long-term average. And this is one of the things that, the satellites, it's updated a couple of times a week. You can see here back at September 2006, this is what a dry pattern looks like, and grains farmers are pretty good at picking this up. An El Nino in the Pacific, the warmest waters over here, that sort of more cloud and floods and everything over there, pulls the trade winds backwards. The weather patterns basically shift across. So the Southern Oscillation Index is just a difference in pressure between Darwin and Tahiti. And so when the pressure's higher over our region and lower out there, all the rain and everything's happening out there, there's clouds at the date line, all these things the Bureau look at to say it shifted, the pattern shifted, it's moved across. And when you see, interestingly here, that this area of Northern Australia, so any rain events for that spring, we've got cooler than the ocean, both here on this side and also on the Indian Ocean side, that saying, well, any weather events we have come across, they're just not very helpful oceans. And so if you imagine you've got a warm bath and the warmest water's up one end, what you're probably going to notice is more steam evaporating, lifting off that warmest water. So basically that's the physics of how these oceans often set up what the atmosphere does. Well, here all the action's over where the warmest water is. So the whole effect of El Nino oscillation and Indian Ocean dipole is about where's the warmest water popped up this year. It's always mixing around out there like in a big bathtub. What I want you to do is just have a look at this area to North Australia, and we're going to jump through and see, is it any different in the spring of 2010? So do you notice a difference there? And I guess one of the things about that, so that's a dry pattern. We don't want to see that this spring, okay? And we'll look at the current pattern in a tick. And it's interesting, that pattern wasn't necessarily good. That was sort of like record temperatures up there that year, and that was one humdinger of a La Nina, and there was moisture blowing in from all directions. What wasn't sure was who is it going to drop out on. And I guess that's the difference between the preconditions for the season as opposed to the weather. The weather is about where is that cold air meeting that plume of weather and who's it going to drop out on. And look out when it's like that. So that was pretty impressive stuff. No good if you're right under it. And, I think we run out of fly strike chemical that summer because it didn't know when to stop. The tropics came to visit. I'm just going to look now at some rainfall records to put some of this into context. And for any record, and this is for Dookie, but it could be anywhere, if you get the long-term rainfall records and line them up from the driest year to the wettest, you can sort of divvy them up into the driest tercile of years, driest third of years, the wettest third, and the ones in the middle. Basically for any site, the long-term record, that's how it's split. A third were dry, a third were wet, a third for medium. What we're going to do is just look at, in previous El Ninos, so that there's an El Nino now happening in the Pacific Ocean, it's useful to know for your particular site, what happened previously in El Ninos? Is it something to worry about here or not? And when? And I guess the really key thing is what we understood now for Victoria, that Indian Ocean dipole and the El Nino Southern Oscillation, it's actually got quite a good correlation for the spring. So the winter spring, when it's doing something up north, the ability of that moisture to affect our rainfall, that's when the strongest correlation is. In autumn, it's not that good. So the reliability or predictability of autumns is not as good. So this is what we're going to look at, is the effect of previous El Ninos on spring rainfall. And I'll get somewhere like Ballarat, and you can see in an El Nino year, the previous 12 events, Eastern Australia, is drier, decile 3, decile 2. You look at Ballarat, and in those springs, so this is August to November, rather than just a third of those springs, when we look at the El Nino springs, basically it doubled the chance of a decile 1 to 3 spring. That's what's happened in the past. But the good news is a third of those El Nino springs were either okay, and there was even a wet one. So it doesn't guarantee a dry spring, but it does change the odds. And so I know a lot of farmers say, well, I'm not sure how to use this because you're not guaranteeing me something. But then I say, well, imagine if, so here's La Nina odds. Imagine if blue was payout and there were two different poker machines. Would you like to know which machine was which? And everyone says yes. So part of this is about how do we use probabilistic information. This doesn't guarantee anything. Just like when you're picking a date for selling wool or filling the silo with feed or whatever, you're making a decision at a time based on what you know. And, you know, just make sure you've got good info, make the call, and that's it. Climate is the same, that stuff can happen, but, you know, there's just probably every third spring there's probably a signal there that's pretty well worth knowing. And you've got to trust, well, what is it for my district, I guess, is the next thing people ask. Here's the Indian Ocean dipole, just again for Ballarat. When there's less moisture coming out here, it leaves that sort of a pattern, doubles the chance of a dry spring. And when its taps are turned on, the Indian Ocean dipole, the strongest influence is down here. And for a lot of southwest Victoria, this is rare. Ballarat's got, obviously there was a dry spring in there amongst it, but for somewhere like Hamilton, it's only really either been wet or average. It's quite a strong one. Overrides El Nino in their part of the world. Here's the El Nino pattern for Mildura, Longerenong, Tungamah, Sale, Seymour, Hamilton. It varies a bit, but basically, you know, there's a little, you know, as Glenn Stevens would say, there's a bit of downside risk in the outlook. And we hope something good happens, but have a plan in case it doesn't. I guess one thing, when we look down in East Gippsland always does its own thing. It's a fantastic place, and they've been pretty wet down there, and it's interesting that in El Nino years, because of that pattern shift, they get a bit more of that moisture tends to come down, and they tend to be a bit wetter. The more moisture is coming from the other side of the range. So it's interesting there, they do their own thing down that way. Here's just another way of putting it. This is previous rainfall events from spring rainfall. You can see there Swan Hill, Yarrawonga, Curryong, Nil, Broadford, Winchelsea, Hamilton, Orbost, Merbau North. And so even in Gippsland, West Gippsland, there's still, if there's more moisture blowing around the continent, it feeds into those weather events that we have there. But it doesn't guarantee dry, but it just does change the odds. It's worth knowing about. Now, this one is about when is this stuff worth looking at? And I guess the best analogy I have is that we're really keen on getting good predictions in autumn, but they're just not as reliable. The oceans are still trying to sort out their form, and it's not until about sort of June, July, August that those oceans, if they're going to zig one way or another, that's when there's more confidence. And I've made the analogy of football. The best way for Victorians to think about seasonal forecasting is think about football, and I've got some friends, and Dale Gray is one of them, who's a keen Tigers fan. And I love Tigers fans. I think they're incredibly enthusiastic. And to the point where I'm starting to enjoy Tigers games more than my real team. And what I love most is that in March, they are talking premierships every year. The Tigers are going to be, and I think the new coach has subdued that a bit. I think he's doing a good job. But I love the excitement and the talk of premierships every March. But really, it's not until June, July, August that you've got a bit of a feel for how are the Tigers travelling this year. Are they top 8? Are they top 4? Or is ninth looking like an option? And I think it's a really good analogy for when you're looking at your confidence or the predictability of the seasonal forecast for Victoria, that you'll hear all sorts of noises at the start of the year. But from your point of view, if you're going to look at it once in the year, it's at some point in June, July, August, quick look up. Is there anything I need to look at this spring? What's going on? Pasture, I guess one of the things, the grain growers have done the most of using these sort of tools, but largely I think actually livestock industry can use this to greater effect than croppers, because the croppers have they've had to sow and do everything, and they're just trying to work out how confident they are about the spring for how much they might urea they might throw out. From a pasture point of view, it's interesting, we've got this challenge that forecasts are less reliable in autumn. And spring is, when there's a bit more confidence in the forecast. And that's when, it's the engine room of our annual production cycle. And I'm thinking maybe we're looking at it a bit wrong, because I get a lot of farmers saying, I can see how this stuff's useful for croppers, it's just no good for us. And I'm missing something. And I'm thinking, well, maybe are we looking at things back to front? Really, should we just shift and measure rainfall in financial years and actually go, okay, spring sets up the whole cycle, because if your spring falls short and you've started feeding and then you're hoping on an autumn break, that next sort of peak, and what's sort of not helping is that, from 1950 to 1980, every second autumn was all right, And since 1980, 1 in 4 has been all right. This sort of, what your decisions to make here early in spring, you can actually be back in spring again dealing with the consequences of it. So I guess that my challenge is how can we use this forecasting stuff to actually maybe help improve confidence or trust in a decision, some tough decisions about, well, what are we going to do earlier? And so that's a real challenge. So we've got The Break. Dale Gray does a great job on that. It's a monthly newsletter. It provides commentary on this stuff in farm language for Victoria. So it's that contexting about which bits to look at when. Also, there's a YouTube thing we've been playing around with where we squeeze Dale's hour-long presentation into 3 minutes, which is fantastic. It's good for you and it's good for Dale too. And we always have a quirky bit at the end just to reinforce the key message, and he's incredibly good at that. We played El Nino Bingo last time, and keep an eye out for MasterChef in the next edition. But here's one of the things he does. He spends a day trawling through the global climate models. There's 11 climate models here. And what he does for Victoria, he looks and burrows through about probably 20 clicks for each one to find what are they saying about Victoria. So for July, August, September, the European model, what's it saying about the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and what's it saying rainfall? Slightly drier. And this is the one that's just in draft form that'll come out next week in email. And then there's the Bureau's one, there's the Japanese, USA, NASA, Chinese, UK, US, the Queenslanders, WA. And what's interesting, I look at this as like a footy tipping list, because if one model somewhere in the world predicts an El Nino, you can bet you're going to hear about it in the Australian media, because they love scaring the bejesus out of you, all right? But it's a lot more interesting to me that if you actually start saying, okay, well, one model in March said El Nino, then actually 3, and then as each month ticked over, hang on, they're all on it. And now, they're all locked in. There's no doubt it's an El Nino, right? So that's a bit like the footy tipping about, are we listening to one crazed Tiger fan, or actually are we getting a better spread here about how does all this go? And so it helps you improve your level of trust of this info. And I guess the commentary for this year has been, well, yeah, there's an El Nino brewing, and yep, it's definitely brewing. The Indian Ocean's been helpful, the warm ocean up there, saying there's still a supply of moisture there. And as each rain event's gone and it's not delivered, or it has delivered in a couple of spots, but largely we've missed out. And as the models click over, saying, the Indian Ocean it's just back to average now. And just last night with the Bureau, the Indian Ocean, there's a couple of the models saying, oh, we think might tuck into dry phase as well. So this stuff keeps moving, but that's there's a signal there. And I guess that's even for this spring, September, October, November. At the moment, there's a few of the models that they're split. Some are saying average and some are saying drier. And when we go through last year's stuff, like last year our rain fell off a cliff for Western Victoria after the end of July. And I guess from one end you say, I'd be disappointed. I mean, they were talking about a potential El Nino, but they didn't say it was going to be bloody decile 1. And I'm saying, well, it's not quite that. I don't think it's that good. I think all it is doing the reserve, the governor saying there's perhaps a bit of downside risk, but he's not saying that things are going to completely tank. He's just saying that keep your eye on it. That's probably as good as this stuff is. And like I said, it might only be every third year where there's a signal there that's probably worth taking up. And let's hope you're in the part of the state that actually defies those odds. This is the current view at the moment. You can see plenty of... An El Nino's already in and being called, and all the models are really expecting that even to get hotter. So it's a fair income El Nino. One of the things, there was a really strong El Nino in 1998. A strong El Nino in the Pacific doesn't automatically mean a strong dry, but it does mean it drives the system more, and it can mean dry. It doesn't guarantee it, I guess. So the big issue we'll be watching is what these oceans do to North Australia and that supply of moisture, and how SOI, how strong it gets, and that pressure pattern over us. And I guess talking to this rain event that went through yesterday, every rain event is golden, and we just don't like it when you see them get squeezed out like this last one did. So it's certainly, Glenn's his bottom lip's starting to quiver, and hopefully he's got a lot of levers there ready to go, which I know you guys do. But we've still got places around with really good soil profile that is full, and that's great. You can see here, these are undersea temperatures of each month out in the Pacific, like a cross-section from New Guinea to South Australia. So when you see these sort of pictures, you can just see that's when they were saying, oh, we're thinking El Nino's coming because this water's coming across, and there it is, there's a heap of heat under that that's going to keep that warming up. We're watching now where this blue stuff ends up, and if it all starts to go blue over the next month or two, that's not a helpful sign. And these are things about trade winds, which is just about whether there's some trade wind anomalies breaking down that flow. So I really think, as complicated as all this gets, I reckon there's probably only 3 messages you take from seasonal forecasting, and it's back to, Glenn Stevens. Well, is this a year of some upside? Is there some downside? Actually, there's nothing to go on. It's just everyone keep doing what you're doing. Or that, listen, it's all over the place. We've got completely no idea. It could be... That's my reading of it. There's 4 options, and anyone that's telling you 3 months out exactly how many mils of rainfall you're going to get in that month, I'd like to know what they're basing that on, apart from stretching the truth. We've done the Brownlow count at the end of each year. Dale Gray goes back and looks at each of the models to see which one actually was closest to what actually happened. And I think it's been really interesting that this stuff has actually been okay. And the clear winner was back in 2010. In March, there were a bunch of models talking about a wet spring. And of course, had such a run of dry years, none of us believed them then. And so when it turned out and there was water and we couldn't stop it raining, later that year, we're thinking, okay, they got that right. But we look at spring 2012, a bit drier. We had an IOD in its drier phase tucked in there, and southwest went drier. Last year was a bit tricky because everything was going okay, but all of a sudden the Bureau's POMA model in July just said, August is going to be dry. And we're saying, why is that? Where's that coming from? Because the El Nino, things sort of looked okay, but then there was a quick shift. But, so the Bureau got that one right. But again, just the signal. This is the part of it about, and they're saying, there's a 40% probability of greater than median. Like, I think we can probably do that better. I'm more reading it as well. They've got a signal there for dry over southeastern Australia. What's behind that? And they're the questions you should be asking about. What's behind that? I need to understand a bit more about it. Curveballs, I guess the main curveball, this temperature stuff, it's been all over the place, but a trend since the 50s, each decade's been hotter. And if we gave this data to a bookmaker without knowing anything about climate science, said, well, what are the odds for the next decade? What do you reckon they'd say? They'd say, well, the race favourites for the next decade to be warmer. And this variability, you can see 2 La Ninas there. La Ninas are traditionally colder than average years because there's more cloud over Australia, and El Nino is a hotter, warmer years in Australia because there's less cloud, the inland heats up, and then in those springs, that's when we get blasted. So one of the issues with drier springs is that we end up having more heat in the inland come to visit us, which that combination of a bit drier and then early heat in spring is not helpful. And speaking of that, this is the temperature trends for summer, autumn, winter and spring for Victoria and for the last 100 years. And for whatever reason, the last 10 springs, there's been about 7 that have been between 1 and 2 or over 2.5 degrees warmer than the average. And that if we've got plenty of moisture, that's not an issue. We just get plenty of growth and winter, we get out of winter quicker. But if we've got marginal soil moisture, a month that's 2 degrees warmer than average is getting September temperatures in August. So that pasture thing, and if you're in a really cold climate, and I know there's people here that aren't disappointed about that, but it is one of the things that increases the bumpiness of springs, that temperature sort of story. So at any point in time though, the good news is we've got recent rainfall, we know soil moisture, or we should, and there's technologies to do soil moisture to a metre, and we know around the state there's places with a full profile. There's a lot of places where that last week's rain didn't measure anything beyond 30 centimetres, and there's not much underneath that. That's pretty important because that's about what rainfall you got in the tank. We've got 7-day forecasts. There's these other long outlooks that we can get a bit of a flag from the break. And this is the good stuff, and Jason's sort of into, and the more lamps more often. than what a lot of you guys are doing about these key points in the year for production, your known benchmarks and thresholds, are we above or below a different time of the year? And it's about making use of that known info. So you don't need the perfect forecast. This is about to, well, we're a bit behind schedule, we haven't got a lot of extra rain in the tank, by this date we're going to do X. And this is about the confidence you need to make those decisions. And there's three things you can do. You can make a decision, you can make a late decision, or you can make no decision. And the question is, which one costs you more? Especially if you get to next May and you're thinking, gee, I wish I could go back to August again. Because you never know when you're going to be in that sort of dry cycle. So that's the important thing. And I guess I'm a big wrap for this. I reckon it's a great practical bit, because we can talk about climate till the cows come home. But this program's actually all about, well, this is the stuff that you can do as a grower. One of the tools in there is the flexibility indicator, about just understanding your own system and how much flex you have got to deal with these bigger seasons, making the most of the upside years, and then how do we, what do we wind back? Which bits do we do? And that's a great package, which I reckon is pretty relevant for where we are now. So I think I'll just finish up there, Jace. Yep. And that's where to subscribe to The Break if you want that bit of commentary. Give it a go for this year and see if it works out or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm a bit of a grain grower, and one of the fears I've got at the moment is old Jack Frost coming along in about September and wiping us out. It's already colder, already had a couple of more frosts than normal in our area. What are we looking like temperature-wise and frost risk-wise?
That's a great
in the spring.
Great question, Stuart, because I was potentially misleading there, because I was talking about day temperatures. What's interesting, when we get the big high pressure pattern set up over us, and this has sort of been a bit of a trend in the last 15 years, is that daytime temperatures in spring have been increasing, but actually minimums have, we've been getting more late frosts. So that sort of frost risk, especially for flowering time for cereals, is that frost window is as bad as ever. And it's interesting when you think about part of the drivers of what makes those frosty, droughty conditions. You get big blocking highs sitting there, bringing up some cold Antarctic air our way, which isn't helpful. But that air is actually really dry. And so it's interesting, during the day we get sunlight, warms up the land mass, and at night that heat just radiates back out to space. Now, if we've got cloudy night, you notice how it's always a lot warmer, because the cloud keeps that heat from the day in. Whereas if you've got a clear sky and it's really dry air, so it doesn't even need to be cloudy, if it's really dry air, that heat just does disappear out to space, and that's the frosty condition. So it's sort of like the droughty effect. It increases that chance of, that warmer daytime temperature, yet, frost risk still hangs around. So they tend to hang around a bit. And I guess that's, one of those things that, that a few people are saying, there's a few things about this I'm not quite liking. Yeah. So.
Next one, Karen.
Yeah. Graham, you presented some figures of, the accuracy of the seasonal forecasts over the last 8 years, and I think most of the times it was okay. So that's probably northern Victoria and southwest Victoria as a general bunch.
Yep.
But the other one is to make accurate decisions, you really need pinpoint accuracy.
Yep.
And so there's a pinpoint accuracy versus a statewide average, and one is going to be a lot lower than the other, because certainly like 3/4 of the state is supposedly in near drought conditions.
Yep.
But there's probably 20% of the state is in decile, in the wetter categories and that sort of thing. So it gets very complicated in trying to use it for an individual pinpoint on a map.
It does. I agree completely. And I mean, last year was a really good example that, brought a signal, El Nino and what have you, and, keeping an eye on the cooler water of northern Australia. But, the eastern half of the state had a great year, and the western half, missed out. And so the preconditions were the same, but what was the difference was, 2 or 3 rainfall events in a pattern that just, was right for your part of the world. So I guess that's the bit about trusting this stuff. Don't trust it too much. This is about the preconditions for the broader season. Knowing what soil moisture you've got stored in that top 1.5 metre is gold. That's a known thing. We should actually be able to know that. And I think that making use of known information, the stuff about your known feed reserves and all that sort of stuff, that is the thing to stick to. That's what you've got control of. This is a quick heads up about, is there anything I need to know? Because if I look around now, like up in northeast has got a full profile of moisture. Parts of the far southwest have, and some of the northern Mallee have done all right too, just because of individual rain events, and some of them picked up 50 mil of rainfall in a thunderstorm that others missed out on. So that's the chaos of weather. So, and I'm not sure who you write to when they don't get it right for your district, but I guess it's just trying to understand the difference between, I think Andrew Watkins, the meteorologist at the Bureau, saying that, climate's what you expect, but weather's what you get. And I guess that's our challenge about how do which level of this do we trust and use? And I think the stuff that's immediately known and knowable, that's still the stuff I'd spend 90% of my time on. It's a quick heads up to see if Glenn Stevens is looking happy or grumpy.
I think that's a good note to finish on. We might give Graham a round of applause if that's okay.
Thanks, mate. All good.